Thank you. Welcome to the Georges River Local Planning Panel for the 17th of November 2022. My name is Sue Francis and I'm the chair of this panel. The panel is currently streaming from the council offices in McMahon Street, Hurstville. The panel members who make up the panel today are Michael Levy, expert panel member, Ewe Giracha, expert panel member, and Erin Sellers at the end, being the community representative on the panel. And we are the panel who've been appointed by the Minister for Planning to determine specified development applications, including the development applications that are on the agenda today in accordance with the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. Firstly, I'd like to state that the panel acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which this meeting is being broadcast as that of the Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation. Now, in relation to the live streaming, I'm required to advise you that under the provisions of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act, PAN is being live streamed and will be made available on the Council's website. In accordance with the protocols, interested parties wishing to make representations to the panel requested to register a summary of their interests, and a total of 12 registrations were received and forwarded to the panel. The panel reviewed these registrations and advised the Council they wish to hear oral submissions from the following persons, and there are 12 persons. And I don't expect anyone to remember the list that I'm giving you because they'll be called out specifically, but that's Wayne Took, Richard Knox, Debbie Kufu, George Wiebe, James Honour, Stephen McKay, Michael Vine, Stephen Vasily, Kiro Salep, Debbie Armanius, Jasmine Bautista, and Katie Gribben. Now we have two applications before us today, and we'll deal with them each in order. And so the first item we will be dealing with is the change of use to the community facility, on 279 Rocky Point Road, St Susie. And the second item will be on the same address, but is to the demolition and erection of a new telecommunications facility on the same site. As required also by the Local Planning Panel Code of Conduct, all members are required to disclose any conflicts of interest in respect of any matters on the agenda, and the relevant forms have been handed to the panel members, and no panel member has disclosed any conflict of interest in relation to the matters on the agenda today. Now, I do understand that some members of the community have raised some concern in relation to the council itself having a conflict, and perhaps I'll ask Liam, who's the Manager of Development Control, to make some comment on that.
Thank you, Chair. Fundamentally, after the completion of the assessment of the application, we became aware of the fact that as part of Council's General Community Grants Program, which covers a wide range of social services, that two grants had been issued to the owner of the site through Council's Community Grants Program. We were only made aware of this after the assessment report was complete. It was carried out, the grants program, through a separate director of the council, and was not something the Environmental Planning Directorate was aware of. In that regard, the application is referred to the panel as the determining authority, and of course the panel is independent from council's internal assessment processes and internal processes.
Thank you. I think the panel will note that. Just to confirm, we are a totally independent panel, and all we had is a report in front of us with the facts and assessment of the matter. So it is a very common practice of assessment by staff and determination by a panel. In terms of the meeting process, as we progress through the matters on the agenda, only those persons who've registered to speak will be able to make representations, and each person will be given a limit of 3 minutes. And I'd ask those persons that are invited to speak clearly and of a volume that will project into the speakers to assist those viewing the live stream, so they can clearly hear what is being said. And that goes to the panel members. To manage the live stream process, all speakers should leave their camera and microphone turned off until their turn to speak. And I also remind people that any defamatory, discriminatory, or offensive language used may result in the author being exposed to liability for which the council and the panel will not take any liability. Now, once we've heard from all the oral submissions on a particular application, we'll move on to the next application, The members of the public are free to continue to listen to the broadcast, but the determination of the application will be made in closed session, not live streamed or recorded, and the determination will be made available on Council's website. Now, this particular meeting is a bit of a hybrid, so this is the first time we've had meeting people actually in the chambers for probably 2 years, which is amazing. It's great, but we also have a bit of a hybrid because we've all got a bit used to doing things from home on Teams. So we've got some of you making submissions in person, which is fantastic, and some on Teams, which is perfectly okay too. But we're all in the chambers together. So what we've tried to do, so we don't chop and change, is we have tried to get all the people in person to speak first on the particular item, and then go to those who are live streamed. So that being the case, I will, however, so before I move forward, I will ask each panel member to declare on the record, even though I've said it, that they don't have any particular conflicts. So start with them.
Yeah, no conflict of interest, Chair.
I don't have any conflict of interest with this.
And Sue Francis is the chair. I have no conflict either. Okay, so let's move to the first speaker on the first item, which, as I previously said, is in relation to the proposed community facility on 279 Rocky Point Road, South Susie. And the first person I have in person to speak is Wayne Took. And if Wayne would like to come and sit here in front of us in person, you're not allowed to breathe though.
Says Andrew Latter.
Okay, the floor is yours. 3 minutes.
Right. Thank you for the opportunity. My name's Wayne Tugay. I live at 24 Alice Street, San Susie, 3 doors up from 279 Rocky Point Road. My objections are centred around 2 points. First, the hours of operation, and secondly, the welfare of children, elderly and disabled using Rocky Point Road. Exodus website states that their operation is between 8:30 and 5 p.m. Monday to Friday, not open Saturdays and Sundays. There's no mention of the facility being open on public holidays. This is their current location in an industrial area at West Botany Street, not a residential area. My concerns are, having moved to a residential area, why does Exodus need to extend their closing hours of operation from 5 p.m. to 9:30 p.m? Why does the youth program is 4.5 hours duration where all the others are 4 hours? What assurances can be given that the timetable will not change in the future? That is, the youth program or any other program will not be scheduled to operate between 5 and 9:30 p.m. beyond Mondays and Thursdays. What assurances can be given that the facility will not be open under any circumstances on Saturdays, Sundays and public holidays? Given the fact their current website does not mention public holidays, refer attachment 1. What assurances can be given the facility will not be, under any circumstances, be open beyond the times in the timetable of activities, including any future 24-hour operation? What assurances can be given by Exodus for the safety of the residents, children, both on the street and at the school, which is a very young school, the elderly and the disabled, and the properties of the residents? Exodus state that a maximum of 5 staff and 14 patrons at any one time. What assurances can be given that these maximum numbers for both staff and patrons will not be exceeded in the future? As Exodus youth are currently located in an industrial area where the necessary assurances required there would not be an issue. The welfare and safety of all the community residents, their property and children on the street and of St George Christian Schools should be a major concern and consideration for both Council and Exodus. Now, there is 2 contradictions, but I'll only deal with one because of the time restraint. It states that counselling for depression, anxiety, addiction, gambling, alcohol and social media only in their website, but no reference is given to the fact that they also counsel those individuals who suffer from substance abuse, sex and pornography issues. the Access website clearly states that drug addiction and sex and pornography is also covered. In conclusion, so my question is Exodus not providing the full story to council and the community of their services and intended hours of operation to ensure a smooth pathway of their development? No one denies the fact that Exodus and similar organisations provide necessary services to the community in today's social environment, but the location of such services must be a consideration at all times. Exodus are currently located in an industrial area where the safety of residents of all ages and their property would not be as an important issue as it is under this current DA. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any particular questions? No. Thank you very much indeed.
Did I speak clearly?
You spoke very clearly. Thank you very much. The next speaker I have is Richard Knox. Thank you, Richard. The floor's yours.
Thank you for the opportunity to address this panel. My name's Richard Knox and I live in Hillview Street in close proximity to the DA property. Such facilities as Exodus provides are vitally important to society, and this is unanimously agreed by the other residents I have spoken to. I have personally provided funds to Sir David Martin Foundation, who provides similar services to young people. Other residents also provide financial and other support to similar causes. The issue is not the facilities and the services provided by Exodus, but the proposed location for these. These need to be located away from residential areas and schools, particularly schools only catering for minors. The DA has failed to mention Exodus's additional counselling for sex, pornography and drug addictions. However, Exodus website clearly states these counselling areas. Exodus' existing site on West Bodney Street is a perfect location. There are no residents or schools anywhere near the Exodus premises. It is surrounded by commercial and industrial premises only. The reason rehabilitation counselling facilities need to be located away from residential areas and schools is, unfortunately, it is statistically factual that depending on the addiction being treated, relapse rates vary between 40% and 85%. We fully acknowledge that all Exodus's clients are reaching out for assistance and are genuinely desiring rehabilitation. Unfortunately, the globally consistent statistics strongly suggest not all will succeed, and even for those that do succeed, they will likely experience relapse during their journey. Relapse is when they return to the same level of abuse as prior to starting the program. Factors increasing the likelihood of relapse include accessibility temptations the addiction relates to. For example, any clients with a pornography or sex addiction with a propensity towards young children should not have counselling next to a school catering for kindergarten to year 2 children. Similarly, if this application is approved, addicts dealing with alcoholism will be in close proximity to the Intersection Hotel, which isn't ideal. Due to these extremely high rates, relapse is generally considered part of the process of eventual rehabilitation for those who succeed. Unfortunately, not all participants will succeed. The volume of research studies linking addictions to crime are enormous. The Australian government, via the Australian Institute of Criminology, have facilitated and published a number of research papers positively linking addictions to crime, such as how much crime
30 seconds, thank you.
How much crime is linked to drug and alcohol related offences. As stated, other governments and organisations have provided similar research papers. Under section 73, page 28 of this agenda, Council has said that we, the residents, have no evidence to support. In the documents that I've provided the panel, I've provided examples of the research reports. There are hundreds of thousands, not 3 or 4. Hopefully the panel is in conclusion, hopefully this panel and council now realises substantial evidence does exist to support residents' serious concerns, and this evidence should be seriously considered in any decisions made regarding this DA based on extreme volume of information available. A decision today would seem hasty and unnecessary, but I'll leave that to the panel's decision. If this DA was still to be approved, we ask what is council's ongoing role and responsibilities should conditions imposed on this DA be breached or the residents' concerns are realised through criminal acts being directly linked to counselling clients of the Exeter Centre. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much indeed. Any particular questions? No. Oh, well, yes, there is.
Just briefly, if I could, and look, I appreciate there are some aspects of the services they provide that are of concern, but I think there are a lot of other services they provide. Am I correct to understand that it's some parts of the services that you're concerned about, but not the balance?
That's correct. We would not have any concerns with any support for aged care, and we actually support their work on the other areas, but not in a residential location next to a school. So it's not against what they're trying to achieve, it's where they're trying to achieve it.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Just a quick question. I haven't seen the material that you've submitted, but with that evidence, what evidence is there to suggest that the location of these sort of services impacts on surrounding facilities like schools?
It's the research that suggests that, and I've highlighted some sections that may be helpful, that where people who are addicted and under the influence of the substance they're addicted to, whether it be alcohol, lose some judgment. And one of the research reports from the Australian government actually suggests that things that people would never normally do, they may do under the influence of a substance, including alcohol. And that often people think that substance crime is only related to raising funds for the next fix. But this actual research report suggests that's not the case. It's the loss of ability to think clearly can cause people to commit crimes that they would otherwise not do if they weren't on the substance abuse. So in a neighbourhood, knowing that there's these extremely high relapse rates that are globally consistent, someone who's going through a program may relapse, may have loss of judgment, and they're in the middle of a residential area next to a junior school. So I think that's the key considerations that we're most concerned about.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The next speaker and person I have is Debbie Kofu. Thank you. The floor is yours. 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to address the panel today. My name is Debbie Kofu. I live in 26 Alice Street for 25 years, 2 doors down from the subject site. I'm a full-time working mother with 2 teenage daughters. We are a close-knit community, and I'm here to talk about the concerns of my family, its residents, with 46 objection letters to the response to the DA. I fear for our children and community. There are several services that have been omitted off the plan, from the plan of management, where the Exodus website states they provide counselling for a variety of issues such as men's behaviour change therapy, bipolar disorder, males who use violence in their relationships, addictions to drug, alcohol, sex and pornography. Perhaps these have been omitted as they are next door to an infant school and a residential area. In terms of planning context, the application fails to address the following issues. Land use. The application seeks a change of use to a community facility which permits physical, social, cultural or intellectual development or welfare. As indicated on the floor plans, an industrial sized kitchen and meals area is proposed. However, as per the Georges River LEP, food production is prohibited in the zone. Security and safety. Our submission includes a photograph of the site at 6:17 outside of daylight savings. It is clearly evident the building does not have visible sight lines, multiple blind corners, as well as limited street lighting. In combination with the excessive trading hours from 9 to 9:30 p.m. during the week, the safety of residential neighbourhood is a major concern. In addition, the SEE fails to address how the proposal will maintain the safety of the surrounding area. Parking. The original traffic report was completed during COVID lockdown and school holidays, which was not a true representation of the parking impact on the street. The amended traffic report indicates the morning operations rely heavily on the street parking, which cannot be accommodated. On the ACNC financial report, it states they have 5 full-time, 4 part-time staff and 50 volunteers, which were not mentioned in the DA. Waste management plan. It is unclear why industrial-sized bins are proposed as the use is for a community facility. However, access is obstructed by the proposed parking area. Right of way. Parking is opposed on a right of way. As per the contract of sale of 28 Alice Street and 279 Rocky Point Road, there should be a 2.5 metre right of way for both properties to give access to Telstra Towers 24/7. The proposal fails to meet this requirement and encroaches on easement. We dispute that the report the SIC provides that there will be no adverse impact on our community. I don't agree. Reasons being kids walking to and from school bus stop, which is right outside the front of the site. Kids riding their bikes knowing that sex, drug, alcohol, porn addicts will be lingering outside our properties. I made my own trip to the Exodus site on West Botany Road, Rockdale, and saw many of the Exodus clients lingering outside the facility. In the SIC, they state that in 20 years they have had no police problems. It's probably because they're in an industrial area. I agree. Whilst these facilities do have a place in our society, it is imperative they remain in non-residential areas to avoid situations arising in residential areas and next door to an infant school. I asked the panel what protections will be in place if this proposal is approved to protect the children and families of our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'll ask the panel, do you have any questions? No? No. Thank you very much. We'll now move to those speakers online, and have we called the first speaker? Or he's already there. Mr. Weeby, George Weeby, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, you have 3 minutes, please. The floor's yours.
Thank you. I already spoke with Debbie, and she included most of my points. So what I'm going to talk about is going to be very brief. My concerns are first security and safety, because I am 63 years old. My wife is 53 years old, and we live by ourselves and we have health problems. I do have a 12 years old daughter who would come and visit me, and she doesn't drive, obviously. So that will be a major concern for us, even being there and even having those people next to us. Calling the police after the fact is not going to help in reducing anybody's fear of what could happen. The second issue I've got is the parking again, because these guys, they are proposing to use the right of way on their land, which is going to immediately tip anybody who's from Telstra, anybody else who's going to use that right of way to come on my side of the land, and that will basically affect my property. Number 3 is the waste management they have. They are proposing to put 2 industrial-sized waste bins next to my doorstep, and basically because it's right of way, there is no protection in any way, and it's visible all the time with all what it's going to bring. And having bins with this size would give an indication of the activity and what they propose to do from there, which is going to be on industrial level, So that is basically as well something that will affect me and my family, and then I think the neighbors as well very deeply. Last one, they already started on their website advertising number 28 Alice Street as a land owned by the school and the church. So they already took over my property for some reason, and if they are advertising that on their website, God knows what else they're not telling the truth about. So I am suspicious of them being next to me. I am suspicious for them being in a low residential area. I mean, they're very few hundred meters away from the business area. They could be there. They have more adequate services. They have in the shops on Rocky Point Road. Why are they going to be here? They could be in the shops where the people are closed at night, and they can do whatever they want to do. And it's a better suited for them. Why in a low residential area where it's affecting everybody, elderly, young children, and everybody else. Therefore, I do really now. I met you on site. I did not speak with you. I spoke with Mr. Liam, the manager there, and he told me that they are proposing that if Telstra needs to remove, to use the poles or to fix anything, they are proposing to remove their cars. Yeah, okay, if they remove their cars, where are they going to put them? And the second thing is, if they remove their cars, how are they going to remove those industrial sized bins? They're not. They have to be on my land and next to my fence and next to my door and next to my bedroom.
Thank you very much.
So,
we can ask the applicant these particular queries that you've got. Thank you
So-
very much.
I do urge you really to I do urge you to reject this application and maybe encourage them to go somewhere else and where it's more suitable.
Thank you very much indeed. Any questions? No, thank you very much. So
Thank you.
next person we have is James Honor.
Yes, good afternoon.
Morning,
name's James
evening, James. The floor's yours. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm principal at St George Christian School, and our infants campus is joining the site. I acknowledge many concerns people have raised. I also acknowledge the good community service focus of the applicant. We have particular concern also in regard to paragraph 50 of the report, that is in regard to contamination. And I'm not confident that that has been adequately addressed. Is added with the provisions of clause 4.6 of the resilience and hazardous set. The proposal is for a change of use to telecommunications facility to community facility, and telecommunications facilities historically various hazardous materials in relation to insulation, asbestos, and so on. How can council and town be satisfied that the site is suitable for the proposed use without potential risks being investigated, identified, and managed? The report does not address the fact that this was raised in our committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any particular questions? No, thank you very much indeed, James. We'll now move on to the next speaker, who is Stephen Mackay. Or Mackay.
Hello.
Hello, Stephen. The floor's yours. 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm the business manager at St George Christian School, so I work with James. My particular concern is the parking on site, which has already been raised. The history of the site when it was being used by Telstra is that they had the site next door, which is 28 hours for their parking. And they sold that when they didn't really need to use the site anymore. So once Exodus takes over the site, they'll need more parking because there'll be more people using it. And they've only got the 2 spaces which are on the right of way. So even though there's a traffic management plan that says that it shouldn't be a problem, we can't see how it won't be a problem with many more cars in the area and many more people using that facility. It's not being used by Telstra at the moment. It hasn't been really for years. Also, the school has many events during the day at the same time as the as Exodus will be operating, and at those times, obviously, there's more cars in the local area. And again, the fact that Exodus will be taking up a lot of the surrounding area will make it much more difficult for parents to park, to come and visit their children for open days, and parent-teacher meetings and all those sorts of things. So we would think that the traffic management plan needs to be looked at again, and extra parking needs to be identified, or the development should go ahead. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I'll just ask the panel if you've got any questions. No? No, thank you very much indeed. We now have the applicant's representatives, and they are here in person. We'll go offline again. And I have Michael Vine, Stephen Vasily, Kira Saleh, and Debbie Armanius. Now, who wishes to speak, or do you all wish to speak?
I was going to say, Chair, do you mind if I'm playing?
Yep.
We've got two operators. Perhaps it's
Yep, absolutely fine by me. Yep, that's perfectly fine. So long as we're clear, we can move the mic around. That would be fine.
Can we move this?
Move it in the middle.
It's very fancy.
So can I urge you to try and respond to the particular issues that you've heard, which is not unusual for you, I'm sure. I know you have a plan of management, and I know there are some concerns with people who've read your website, and it's different from what you have in your application. I'd like you to clarify that if you can. And I know that the parking is for staff, not for the users, and also I'd like you to go into the traffic report in terms of the likelihood of use and public transport use versus private transport, and drop-offs for youth, etc. The floor's yours.
Thank you very much, panel members and chair. I absolutely will address the concerns of the neighbours and take those very seriously. But I'd just like to step back a little bit, and just in terms of identifying the context of this property and this site. It was historically been a Telstra Exchange building. It was sold. It's become surplus to the requirements of Telstra. And in doing so, Telstra's maintained a lease that is due to expire. They've got the option to renew, but it's due to expire mid next year. So something will have to happen to this property in one form or another. It's currently zoned SP2, so there's an incredibly limited amount of activities that can be undertaken at the property, and it will simply sit there vacant and derelict, which I don't think is going to serve anyone's interest. Fortunately enough, when it was being sold, it was bought by the operators of a community facility, and basically they're here with us and they can respond to to some of the operational aspects. But basically something will happen on this property. They've purchased the property. There's no major works. The proposition is fairly internalised, and also the activities are likely to be passive, and that's just by virtue of the spaces that's available at the property with a low number of uses. Really going to the objections, and I'll respond to those, and I think it's probably going to be appropriate for the operators to respond to some of the concerns about the people that are going to frequent this facility. But we've tried to make it pretty clear in the statement. We've tried to set up a cross-section of a typical regime and activity. So we've provided a table that said, typically 9 till whatever, but we made it very clear to planning staff that we didn't want a rigid table to be conditioned, because it's a community facility. It's subject to some change on a demand basis. So we've relied on those core operating hours, which are Monday to Friday between 9 and 9:30. The idea of this being inappropriate because it's not in, because it is in a residential area. It's a fairly high activity area. It's on an arterial road that takes more than 40,000 vehicles a day. It's next to a school. On the other side of the intersection, there's another little retail space, and it's not too far from the either town centre, north or south. So it is not a pristine, quiet cul-de-sac type residential area. I guess just a couple of other issues that came up through the objections about criminal people and dangers of those. We tried to make it fairly clear in our documentation without going into too much detail that this is a community facility that's servicing people of the community. These people of the community, whether they're struggling in particular ways, they could be picking their children up from St George Christian School. They could be in McDonald's having a meal next to another, one of our next to me or anyone here. This facility isn't targeted towards violent people or people with or sex offenders or anything. Very normal people struggle with sex issues, and that is a very normal thing of society. And this service has been set up to address that and to provide that service. So I'd just like to make it clear that there's the current activity operated, and this can be extended on, is not targeted towards criminal or violent people. And if such people seek, services from the centre, there's arrangements in place to provide that service off-site, whether that be in an institution or or at that person's home. So that's kind of dealing with the perception of the type of people being attracted to the area or to the facility. And we don't know who could be attracted to the facility. It's very much, it's a community service. But in general, that's the idea and that's the practice to date. The right of way issue, that's been raised and it's been discussed with assessment staff also. We've got two options. We can not have any parking on site, and we can forfeit on-site parking to allow for access to the Telstra towers, 2 to 4 times a year or whatever infrequent maintenance can be done, that is required. And I think that's outlined in their submission that maintenance will be infrequent. Or we can provide off-site parking, and we can put in a management arrangement and a dialogue between the owner of the property and essentially a tenant that will be using that will be obviously servicing the towers on a needs basis. So I'm happy to discuss with the panel an operational arrangement where the infrequent use of the servicing of those facilities can be factored into both the application before the panel and the application that will follow this under the panel's assessment. So there can be a dual conditional arrangement to allow an access arrangement and use of the space to get cars off site. I think just quickly the asbestos and the contamination issue that was raised. There may be asbestos in this building, as there is asbestos in a number of residential buildings that get approved for removal. And typically the Australian standards for demolition covers protocols for addressing asbestos and wrapping and addressing asbestos. This is not an unusual thing to encounter, and we're not necessarily saying there is. I'm not discounting it, but the idea of asbestos being something that is jurisdictionally prohibitive to the panel determining the application, I reject that, because it's something that occurs in pretty much most knockdown rebuilds of older style buildings. On the traffic and the parking, I mean, we've done our very best to accommodate parking on site in the form of 2 tandem spaces. The original application sought more spaces, but understandably, running parking in tandem with more than 2 spaces is a bit of a nightmare, and I agree with the idea of reducing it to 2 on site. We've had a traffic report. They've undertaken studies. It's a low impact facility, and it will be purposed for something one day. And a maximum of 14 people and 5 staff members is fairly low in an area that has very good access to bus services and other public transport options. And the other thing as well to mention on that front is that it is a community facility that will be servicing members of the community who could readily walk and use alternative transport, and that's encouraged at the moment with the premise, and it can be encouraged with the ongoing operation. So unless I've missed any issues that have been raised by objectors, do you think, through you, Chair, do you think it's wise that the operators have anything to say about the operation of the centre?
I certainly think Certainly, we would like to hear from you. Can I just ask one question
course.
though, whilst I remember it? When we're out on site this afternoon, pretty sure there's a diesel tank in the front. Your plan, your demolition plan, say you're removing that diesel tank.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought in the absence of that, I would have agreed with you that there's no breaking of ground contamination-wise, but according to your plans, you're removing that diesel tank, which does open you up to, I think, some preliminary contamination work required. But I just
yeah,
I mean, I'm only looking at your plans.
yeah, and noted. And if there is a diesel tank on site, it would need to be.
That's certainly what
yeah,
it appears to be.
Yeah, if there's a diesel tank on site, it would need to obviously be removed and remediated. It's not a petrol station. It's a tank. It's a diesel tank. And so I'm happy for there to be some form of requirement for a clearance certificate to be provided prior to any occupation of the premise.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're probably, unless there's any particular questions about what. Yep. Sure.
Well, it was more. It's like it's how far do you go with planning and conditioning these things? It's like conditioning a childcare centre where there's a particular number of kids, and in the event one has a birthday, do you kick them out? You know, and it's the same as this, where if you're offering a service to the elderly and that dries up, can you not fill it up with some other service that's in need that falls within the parameters of what you deliver because of that? So we provided that as a cross section to show that there will be a structure of services provided throughout the week to ensure that there's not more than the identified number of people at the facility at any one time. But what we don't want to move towards is such a rigid consent that a non-charity community facility has to compromise on their service delivery because we've gone too hard on the conditioning of the DA. That's as simple as it was, and I don't think it serves any planning purpose to provide anything beyond the scope of what's provided and the hours of use and what we've sought to be included in the consent.
Perhaps I might expand on that because I think if I'm reading your plan of management, the maximum of 14 patrons on site with 5 staff, so that's 19 in total maximum.
Yep.
I hear what you're saying about it's a counselling facility and different groups will require counselling at any point in time, and there might need to be a degree of flexibility. But if I'm reading this right, the maximum at any point in time on site is 14 plus 5 staff.
That's right. 19
persons at any time for any purpose.
Yeah.
Correct? Okay. All right. And in terms of, and it's been suggested, you know, do you have a 4-hour counselling session? I suspect the answer to that is no, but you might. But at any point in time,
the counselling may be available to people throughout that period, and you've got a number of people that are providing service in the community, and they'll structure it in a way where they can deliver that service. And if it's we're going to have some counsellors here, and we've got a slot there, you know, and without and once again, this will change and evolve, and it's according to funding and staff and services that are in demand, and that's why it's important to identify what is proposed, but entrenching that into some form of rigid consent requirement that ties up a non-profit, I don't think it serves anyone's interest.
Yeah. Perhaps we might hear from Exodus.
Thank you. My name's Kira Salib. I'm the Chief Operating Officer. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I've heard a lot of the community concerns, and I'd like to address a few of them. The first thing I'd want to highlight is we have a very strict intake process for any client that we accept into our service to provide a service. And that intake assessment covers the client's history, their presenting issues, any complicating factors in their life, any criminal history, any pending court matters. So we get a very detailed and holistic view of that person's life and the reason why they've come to us for a service. And we factor all that information into our decision whether we're going to provide a service or not. So any information within that intake and assessment where we identify any risks, any concerns, anything that may be of concern to our staff or the community, we would make the decision to not provide a service, even if it's a need for that client that we are unable to meet. If it's above our capacity or capability, we would not accept that client into our service. Our staff, who are the frontline workers, who would be alone in a room with our clients or transporting them in a car, they're the most at risk. So never would we accept a client into our service that poses a risk to our staff members, let alone community members, neighbours, kids at the school, anything like that. In regards to drug and alcohol clients, the journey of a drug addict, there's a, it's a long journey, and there's different stages. In regards to drug and alcohol counselling, we will never admit a client for counselling if they're still in the early phase of their journey. If their addiction is not under control, if they haven't sought any rehabilitation, if they're drug affected or they're in that stage, counselling isn't appropriate and it's not effective. So we would never admit a client at that stage if that's where they're at. 20 years of operation, we've never had to call police for any client that's been drug affected or of danger to anyone. We have drug testing kits on site, and we've never had to use them in 20 years. We've never had a client present as drug affected, but we've had to ask them to do a drug test for us to see whether they're affected or not. That's never happened in 20 years. In regards to the sex and porn addiction, the context of that in our website, and to date, all the sex or porn addiction therapy that we've provided is in the context of marriage counselling. So we do a lot of marriage counselling or relationship counselling, and yes, some of those clients, in general, the male in that relationship may have an addiction to porn or sex, and that's affecting their relationship, and that does come up in marriage counselling. The other part to the porn addiction, we provide pastoral care programs to schools off-site, and in that pastoral care program, one of the topics is porn, and we provide school counselling to those students off-site in the schools, and some of the senior high students have discussed sort of porn addictions within their therapy. That's done off-site, and that's year 10, 11, 12 students. So that's the context of the sex and porn addiction. In regards to general counselling, most of, if not all, the counselling we do is mainly depression, anxiety, and relationship counselling. We don't employ clinical psychologists, we don't have psychiatrists, so we don't do any of the high-level mental health issues like schizophrenia or split personality, and those types of, mental health issues. It can be accompanied by dangerous behaviour and things like that. So anything that's above our capacity, we refer out. We have psychotherapists and counsellors, and most of the counselling we provide is depression and anxiety and relationship counselling. Homelessness is another, I think, concern that was raised by the community. All that is outsourced. We don't house anyone at the premises. No, there's no homeless activity in the premises at all. We'll support the clients with accessing government services and things like that. We have crisis accommodations, about 7 currently, that rental properties that we rent throughout Sydney, and so we'll house those clients in those properties. All of that is off-site and not at the centre at all. And in regards to the parking and the staffing and things like that, since COVID, a lot of we now run kind of a hybrid model of working from home and working in the office. And a lot of the counselling is also over the phone. So a lot of clients, they've experienced the luxury of having over the phone counselling, and they choose that more often than not because they get the benefit of counselling in the luxury of their own home. So a lot of the counselling is done over the phone, not in person, because the clients choose that and we give them that option. And a lot of the staff would either do their casework and their service provision out in the community, taking clients to appointments, driving around, doing home visits, things like that. And the counsellors would work from home if their clients are having phone counselling. That's, yeah.
Perhaps you can just clarify for me, do you get referrals from medical practitioners, government agencies, or are you private? Does they come private, or all of the above?
Yeah.
All of the above.
Look, all of the above. The majority of our referrals come from community members. We have received referrals, for example, from Salvation Army, where they've had a referral to them. They don't have capacity, so they'll refer on to us. They're currently next door to us. We have had referrals, yes, from a couple of GPs, but I'd say more than 80% of our referrals would be from within the community. We are a non-for-profit, we're community funded, we're not funded by the government, we run off community donations. So the community that fund us and donate to us are very aware of the services that we provide. So most of the referrals are community referrals. Yeah.
It's not connected. Good afternoon, panel members and the community members. Thank you for the opportunity to bring Exodus to this forum and explain who we are. I've got 3 minutes to cover about 30 years. So for me, I'm 63, I've been a community member, born on the promenade in Sans Souci. I currently live in 2 Malua Street, Dolls Point. So I am a community member first, and then the founder and director of Exodus. So who are we? We have been with you in this Sans Souci area for 25 years. Our address was opposite the reception lounge on Rocky Point Road for 15 years, and no one knew we were there. We reach out to all community members and we try our very best, as Kiro, my Chief Operating Officer, has tried to capture, from seniors. So we look after seniors. We are not a threat to them. We have 60 or 70 seniors on our database. We take them to doctor's appointments. We feed them. We make sure that they have social engagement to keep their mental health going. Our youngest client is 9 months old, and that is a child with a heart condition. And it's a single mum. So within 3 minutes, we cover anything from a newborn up to 99 years of age. We have never called the police, that's been stated 3 times. We are very much known in the community, through the churches, through the schools, through community members, through the clubs, the motorboat club, the funding. We get about 5 to 10% per year from the community grants, and the rest is funded by community members, your neighbours, my neighbours, myself. So we are not new to this. I would love the opportunity to open our doors to anyone to come and see what we do, and to put all fears away. God knows we need community most of all, especially if you are living where I'm living. Yes, there is a problem with youth. We don't serve those youth, but we certainly go to the schools that they attend, and we try and mentor them and turn them around from probably knocking on your windows at night. That's all. Open for questions.
Thank you very much indeed. Panel, any questions?
Just a brief question. One of the concerns that was raised by some of the community members was around the current operations and people lingering after sessions. I'm just wondering if you have a response to that, or if it's something you've observed in terms of running the facility.
So, I mean, I myself am not present for every every time we run an operation, except some that they personally myself. I haven't seen that myself, and I'm more than happy to get more information to look into that if it was a specific incident or something that somebody saw. But in general, you know, when programs are finished, the programs are finished. We don't encourage lingering. There's nothing to do at the centre. Like, it's not like after a program has happened, there is options for people to hang around, play games or movies or eat or anything like that. There's nothing on offer. I can appreciate the community's concerns that this is now going from an industrial area to a residential area. And the safeguards, I heard a lot of the community members asking what assurances will be given, what safeguards. And I think that's something we can commit to, is once a program has ended, we can be very strict with the timing. We can have signs up everywhere in the premises that this is a residential area, keep the noise down. If we are witnessing anything like that or people are lingering, we can move them on very easily. So that assurance from us as the operators is we don't want to impact the community. If I was living in an area and there was a community organisation making noise, I wouldn't be happy. So I can totally appreciate that. And our assurance is, as the operators, we will do everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen. Yeah. Thanks.
This time I remember. So my question is operational. So how do your clients contact you can they turn up to the premises, or how it happens?
So we get a lot of referrals via phone. So all of our mobile numbers are on our business cards on the website. Again, a lot of the community referrals of people that are known to us or that support us and donate to us, so they'll refer, so they have our contact details. We on our website have a referral form. So anyone that wants to access the service can jump on our website, fill in the form, their name, details, what service they'd like, and submit it, and it comes through to us in the email. Rarely do we have drop-ins, so yes, we can, but rarely do we have walk-ins where someone will knock on the door and say, hey, I need help, can you guys help me? It can happen here and there, but very rarely. That's not how we receive most of our intakes. A lot of them is community referrals via phone or through the referral form online.
Thank you.
We're also very strict. We have a no drug and alcohol consumption. So if we know that you are intoxicated, which is quite clear, you are escorted away, and it has not happened. We're not that kind of centre. We're not a drop-in centre where you're going to get gangs. This is a high-end, private, community, low-impact organisation. The same model has been used in 4 countries. We have 4 countries with offices. They're in London, they're operating like that. As I said, in fact, the first couple of years, the officers and the councillors were operating from my home and outside of the home going to the clients. So it's been there for a very long time, almost 30 years, all up.
We have no more questions. Thank you very much indeed. We will consider all the issues we have heard, questions, queries, and submissions. Thank you very much. Thank you. And what we'll do now is we'll move on to the next item, which is the demolition of the existing two Telstra towers and the erection of a single pole. And in respect of that, I have 2 submitters via Teams. So the first person is James Honour again.
Yes.
You're back.
Great. Thank you very much. Telstra Tower matter.
Yes.
We note that the report suggests the exposure limit at the school will peak at 2.8%. But the maximum radio emission is 3.6, 63 metres from the tower. What I'd like to ask is if this is the exposure limit at ground level or above ground, particularly on the roof of a 2-storey building. And if ground level, what is the power output above ground as the tower appears to be located adjacent to our 2-storey building? The maximum exposure limit might be higher above the ground.
I think that's fair enough, and we can certainly ask the applicant that when we get to speak to them.
We obviously enrol young children whose brains are still developing, so we want to be particularly cautious about this matter. The second issue is there's discussion in the report about the pole being suitable for co-location by other carriers. Presumably the antennas of the other carriers will be lower on the pole. Will a DA be required for the installation on other antennas? And how can it be ensured the emissions from any future antennas meet the maximum emission output?
I'm happy to ask the applicant that, but I think each provider is very precious about its own poles, so I suspect they won't be sharing, but I'm happy to ask. Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
The next speaker I have is Steve Mackay.
Hello.
Hello, Steve.
Hi, thanks for having me back again. Our first issue is with the size of the tower. You can't hide a 25-metre tower. It's right next door to the school, and it has reputational impacts on the school, visual impacts on the school. We've lost enrolments as a result of the current towers because parents are concerned about the impacts of the emissions. And that given the size of this tower, there will be much more concern, we feel, amongst the community, amongst the parent community. It's interesting that the photos that Telstra provided had none from near the school, and the only one that was close to the school was kind of hiding the post tower behind a tree, so that you couldn't really see what it would be looking like if you're standing in the school or just outside the school gates and looking at this tower, which will be basically the centrepiece that you look at from the school. Also, if the development does go ahead, we would request that there would be a dilapidation report done for our site, because again, we are very close. You can see it on the photos. We are very close to the Telstra towers, and we're worried that the construction of the new tower would damage our building. Also, we would want to ask, has the applicant investigated locating the tower? I think they have investigated locating the tower elsewhere, but it seemed to be within a very small range. One site that came to mind for us was Clayton Reserve, which is just down the road, and it could be co-located on a light pole there, and therefore have no impact to any residents because it's in a park, not next door to a school and houses. And then lastly, if the development does go ahead, can the applicant advise what is involved in related to the construction works? Because again, we're trying to operate a school, and we're worried that the construction noise will make it impossible to operate our school. Could it be done only in school holidays? There's cabins adjacent to the northern boundary of the site. Are they going to be air conditioned? Has an acoustic report been done on those air conditioning? Will they meet the relevant standards? All those sorts of questions basically boil down to two things. Firstly, we would obviously prefer the tower not to be next door to the school, and certainly not at the height that it's going to be. That will damage the reputation and therefore our enrolments. And secondly, but if it is to be there, we would really prefer to be involved in the construction programs so that we know that it won't impact the running of the school. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much, and we'll raise those matters with the applicant, who we'll speak to now. Thank you. Do I have the owners here, but do I have also the applicants? Oh, they're by teams, aren't they? Is that right? Okay, so do I presume we want to have both the applicant, Jasmine Bautista, and Katie Ribbon, consultant, on the line at the same time? Can we do that? We can? Fantastic, let's do that. And I do have the owners here, do I? Do I have the owners here in person? I do. Oh yes, of course. Of course, you're the owners. We've got that bit. Do you wish to speak at all? No, I have you down here. I didn't think there would be, but no. Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's hear from the applicant, Jasmine and Katie.
Sure thing. Thanks, Stephen and James. We really do hear your concerns. In terms of the location,
I'm sorry, who am I speaking to? This one's Jasmine.
Oh,
Jasmine.
Sorry. Yeah, this is Jasmine.
Thank you.
For some reason, it's not letting me turn my camera
No,
on.
that's okay. JB is flashing. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, Katie's online as well. But in terms of location, yeah, so we did look into other options for locating it, but in terms of telecommunication facilities, we look at the major features and this being elevation. So the higher the tower is, the more coverage it gets. So the site was at a topography that was adequate to suit the telecom facility. Another thing is that it has to be located centrally to the coverage area. And for that reason, it reaches more residents that are within the target coverage area. And similar to the elevation, the site was selected because it was centrally located. We couldn't locate it at other existing telco facilities, mainly because they aren't structurally sound enough to accommodate the upgrade. And for that reason, the site that's selected and proposed was chosen as the best case. In terms of the height, I can acknowledge that 26.5 meters is high, but to develop telco facilities, there are two unavoidable characteristics, and that being that they need to be tall. In order to operate effectively, they need to be able to reach the coverage area without having any structures or any objects that block the actual tower. And of course, they need to have that line of sight, similarly to deliver the good coverage. Because the height is of such a large scale, we have put visual design considerations in place to minimize impact, mainly it being a slimline monopole. So this is the better option compared to putting a lattice tower because it is slimline. And again, we are replacing two existing timber poles. So we saw this as a better option. Another thing is that we're doing color shrouding. One of the conditions of consent is to make sure that it's a non-reflective finish. This also reduces the visual impact. And another thing is that the location was carefully considered. We have recessed it as far from the street to minimize impact from street level. And yeah, so we have also positioned it so it's screened by the two-story buildings at the school. In terms of the EME, Kate speak more to this, but generally there is a reduction in the EME exposure. And for this, it is a better outcome in terms of the health concerns of the students and also of the parents.
Sorry, can I just clarify that, Jasmine? Does the EME dissipate the taller, the higher you are, or is the height not relevant to the exposure percentage?
I can just jump in there if that's all right. The EME does change based on what height the antennas are located at. So with this proposal, the EME is decreasing from the existing solution because the antennas are further higher in the air, so they're further away from the ground.
Right, so moving to a single pole from the current two poles, which are much lower, the EME is worse currently than it will be in the future, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. What additional likely antenna would you be putting on the tower beyond what you have proposed here?
In the future, are you referring to?
Yes.
So in terms of Telstra's proposal, nothing will change from the location of the existing head frame. There might be swap outs of equipment as the technology changes, but it will all be within the same head frame. We won't be changing the height or anything. It'll only change in height if a different carrier chooses to do an upgrade in the future, but we don't have any oversight of that.
And separate consent will be required for that?
Yes, yeah.
Thank you. I think we have a question over here from another panel member.
Hello. So my question is, these antennas, can they be painted in a different color? Or they have to be white?
They can be painted if that's a requirement.
Yeah, and that doesn't affect the performance.
That's right. They can be painted and they're fine for performance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The other sites that were investigated, and I think there's a table, I'm not sure if it's in the assessment report or the statement of environmental effects, says that the two sites considered on top of buildings a bit further up Rocky Point Road were discounted partly on the basis of EME concerns. So I know you mentioned before that there were concerns about, could they go up structurally, but EME concerns were raised as part of that. I'm just wondering that if it's a concern in another location, why isn't it a concern here?
So with those candidates, if they were on a rooftop, if the structures were mounted directly on the rooftop, we have to consider the EME levels from all roof surfaces. So that EME would be considered from the roof level, whereas because our solution is on a monopole separately, the EME level at ground is lower.
Okay, so where you're mounting onto an existing building, you need to largely mount it on the roof rather than putting a further or having the capacity to put another pole on to lift it up higher. Is that
Yeah,
right?
that's right. That's right.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Unless there's anything else you wish to clarify, I'm actually looking, and it may be for me that need to clarify. I noticed that the rate's gone from 3.9% to 3.61%, but I'm looking at your tables. The numbers, for example, on the school look lower than 3.6, but it might be the way I'm reading it. Is that true or not? I assume that would be for Katie.
I'm not too sure on the rate. Sorry, I'll have to have a look.
I'm just looking at your report, which is the maximum cumulative EMA level for the proposed configuration. It's got the school.
Oh, the EME levels. Okay,
Yeah.
I see. So the school levels. So what was your question regarding that?
Well, the report suggests that the maximum EME level calculated, I suppose that's at 63 metres from the location, is 3.61% compared to 3.9% at present. But I'm just looking at the table, which doesn't have those numbers, and it may be the way I'm reading it. I'd just like you to clarify that because they seem to be lower levels at the school.
Yes, so the 3.6 at the top is the maximum level within the whole area calculated. And then at the table at the bottom, that's the level calculated specifically at those points. So it's lower at the school.
So the school level maximum, I'm reading this, is 2.7%. And what is the maximum allowed percentage under the federal legislation? Just so that we can have a handle on that.
So it's a percentage of the allowable exposure limit, so 100%.
Oh, right. Okay, so 2.7% out of literally 100%. Okay,
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, and just on that, so is 100% deemed to be safe and a point that you can't go beyond, or just if we can understand
that's right.
that?
Yeah, so that's the public exposure limit. Yeah.
And is that like a permanent measure, or does it go in bursts, or? I mean, the EMEs are constant, I guess.
Yes, that's right. They're calculated based on the standard operating power for the antennas, and that's just measured as a constant rate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I think that answers our questions. And you being the last speakers, I think we will then say thank you very much and close the meeting at Well, it says 3:13 here, 5:16 it is, 5:16. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.